It started with a scent. A sharp, unfamiliar blend of floral and musk floated into the living room the moment Taylor stepped through the front door. I was half asleep on the couch, the TV murmuring some late-night rerun I wasn't even watching, but that smell, so distinctly not hers, jolted me awake. She paused in the entryway like she hadn't expected me to be awake. Then she smiled, tight and practiced. "Hey," she said, like it was just any other night. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't wearing her usual black office slacks or the cardigan that perpetually lived on the back of her chair at work. No, tonight it was a navy wrap dress that clung in a way I'd never seen on her outside of holidays. Her hair was curled, styled, touched up with some golden shimmer that caught the hallway light. She'd even changed her earrings, gold hoops. New, or at least new to me. And the lipstick. Red. Not the soft nude she kept in her purse. This one was bolder, deliberate. Perfectly applied, no fading at the edges. Her heels clicked softly on the hardwood as she walked past me and dropped her purse on the table. "Emergency meeting," she said, already turning away like the conversation was over. "Whole team stayed late. We grabbed coffee after. Just needed to decompress." I blinked. "Coffee? At 11:42 p.m.? You went out dressed like that?" I asked, more surprised than accusatory. But her reaction told me everything. She froze for half a second, barely perceptible, but I saw it. Then she exhaled sharply and gave me a look I'd grown familiar with lately. Not anger. Not guilt. Just irritation. Like I was a fly buzzing too close to her face. "I didn't plan on it," she said flatly. "We were supposed to just talk. Everyone wanted to vent. We've been under pressure lately. You've been saying I should make time for friends, right?" She wasn't wrong, technically. A month ago I'd told her I was worried she was burning out, working too much, keeping everything bottled in. But this didn't look like stress relief. This looked like a date night. "I like the hair," I said after a beat, trying to keep my voice level. "When'd you do it?" She shrugged. "This morning." "You didn't say anything." "I didn't think it mattered." That one hit me sideways. Didn't matter? We've been together 5 years, married for 3, and I noticed when she switched toothpaste brands. But a hairstyle she's worn for the past 2 years suddenly changes and she didn't think it mattered? Still, I nodded like I accepted it. What else could I do? She started toward the hallway, pausing only to slip off her heels. As she walked away, I noticed something glinting on the back of her dress, tiny flecks of glitter or maybe powder. And on her shoulder? A faint, golden shimmer that definitely didn't come from our couch. That scent lingered in the air behind her. Expensive. Unfamiliar. And not the kind of thing that clings to you from a coffee shop. "Taylor," I said quietly, not meaning to stop her but unable to help myself. "You smell different." She turned her head slightly, just enough to glance at me out of the corner of her eye. I was in close quarters. You know how some people go overboard with perfume. Again, not a lie. But not quite the truth either. She didn't wait for a reply. She disappeared down the hall, the bathroom door shutting with a soft but deliberate click a second later. A moment later, I heard the shower turn on. I sat there in the living room, suddenly wide awake, trying to piece together everything she'd said and everything she hadn't. My stomach twisted, but I didn't have a smoking G*N. Just clues. Shadows. And it wasn't just tonight. The signs had been subtle, barely noticeable at first, like the feeling of something out of place, even though everything looks the same on the surface. Over the past few weeks, our rhythms had started to shift. Dinners got quieter. Her laughs felt delayed, forced. She spent more time on her phone, more time in the car before coming inside. Always a new excuse. Always something urgent. But this tonight was the first time it didn't feel like overthinking. This was the first time it felt real. I tried to tell myself that maybe I was tired. Maybe I was just reading into things. But the couch didn't smell like perfume. The hallway didn't sparkle. Her eyes, when they met mine, didn't say, "I'm glad to be home." They said, "I didn't expect you to notice." The water kept running. I could hear it from the living room, steady and hot, washing off the night. What haunted me most wasn't the perfume or the dress. It was how quickly she'd shut down the conversation. The flat tone in her voice. The practiced explanation, like she'd run it over in her head on the way home, trying out different versions until one sounded convincing. I glanced down at the couch beside me, noticing the remote sitting next to my phone. A little red bubble on my lock screen, no messages from her tonight. Not a single check-in. Not an "on my way" or a "sorry I'm late." And I realized something that chilled me more than anything else. She hadn't expected me to ask questions. She had counted on me being asleep. Counted on me to not notice. Or worse, counted on me to not care. Eventually, the water stopped. I heard the door open, footsteps padded down the hall. But she didn't come back into the living room. She didn't sit next to me or ask how my night had been. No hug. No, I love you. Just the faint sound of our bedroom door closing. I sat there another 20 minutes listening to the silence, to the sound of my own heartbeat drumming in my ears. I thought about going in there, confronting her, demanding more details. But what would I say? What did I even have? A scent? A dress? Lipstick? A new hairstyle? Nothing concrete. Nothing that wouldn't be flipped back on me with practiced, chilly calm. So I did nothing. I turned off the TV, sat in the dark. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was in my home anymore. I felt like a stranger in a house that no longer belonged to me. A guest in my own life. Something had shifted tonight. I didn't know what it was yet, but I could feel it. I didn't sleep that night. I laid there, staring at the ceiling, my chest tight with something I couldn't name. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It wasn't sadness either, because that would have meant I knew for sure something was broken. No, what I felt was more like a deep itch in the brain, unsettling, persistent. Like my subconscious had been piecing things together while I was too busy trusting her to see the signs. And suddenly, they were everywhere. When you love someone, really love them, you build your life around giving them the benefit of the doubt. You dismiss inconsistencies as forgetfulness, chalk coldness up to stress, explain away late nights with logic you want to believe. You convince yourself the little changes are your imagination, that you're insecure or overreacting. But once the seed of doubt is planted, once the first crack forms, it all begins to shatter. That night on the couch, in the quiet dark, I started thinking back. And I mean really thinking. The emergency meetings that had become more and more common over the last few months. I used to joke about how her office was turning into a sweatshop. She'd laugh and say the partners were relentless, that promotions only came to those who stayed late. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? But there were moments I should have caught. The way she lingered in her car when she got home, 15, sometimes 20 minutes, just sitting there in the driveway. She always claimed she was finishing a podcast or decompressing after a long day. I'd smile, hand her a glass of wine, and tell her to relax. Then there was her phone. It was always face down. Always. At first I thought nothing of it. I mean, that's what people do to be polite during dinner, right? But it wasn't just at dinner. It was on the coffee table, in the bathroom, beside the bed. Always face down, like the screen was a secret. One night, a few weeks ago, I got up to get some water and noticed she wasn't in bed. I assumed she was in the bathroom, but she was gone longer than usual. I found her in the garage, of all places, sitting in the driver's seat of her car with the door slightly ajar. She startled when she saw me, then laughed it off, said she couldn't sleep and needed a change of scenery. She claimed she was drinking tea. But the next morning I noticed the faint outline of a wine glass ring on the hood of the car. There was also the Bluetooth incident. It seems minor, but now it eats at me. She was driving my car the other day, and when I turned it on afterward, I noticed a device named Chris's phone had auto-connected to the stereo. I asked her about it, and she just shrugged. Oh, probably one of my coworkers who carpooled with me last week. She said it so casually, like it was normal. But we don't live in a city where people carpool. And she hates having others in her space. She said it 100 times. Then there was the weekend she forgot about our plans. It was just last month. We were supposed to drive out to her parents' place for her dad's birthday. She claimed she had a deadline and couldn't make it, that she'd already told me and I must have forgotten. She was adamant, almost aggressive about it. I actually apologized for not remembering and went alone. Her mom kept asking where she was. I told them the same story she told me. And then there were the clothes. A new blouse here, a different perfume bottle on the bathroom shelf, makeup shades I'd never seen her wear. When I asked, she always had an answer. It was on sale. Just wanted to try something new. Oh, I've had that for ages. All perfectly reasonable until they weren't. The most damning piece of all? Something I dismissed as nothing at the time. 3 weeks ago, I'd come home early. It was maybe 3 p.m. on a Thursday. I had forgotten my laptop charger and figured I'd surprise her with coffee. She wasn't expecting me. The moment I opened the front door, I heard her in the living room. Laughing. Not just chuckling, full, unguarded, belly-deep laughter. A kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in months. Then it went silent. I walked in and she was alone, her phone in her lap, eyes wide. Hey, she said quickly. Didn't know you were coming home. I asked who she was talking to. She smiled and said, just a funny video. I didn't believe her. Not then, not now. But I smiled back. Because that's what you do when you're trying to keep things together. You play along. I kept thinking about these moments like puzzle pieces I'd pushed into the wrong places, trying to make them fit into a picture that never existed. And the more I reviewed them, the clearer the image became. There was a distance between us I couldn't explain anymore. It wasn't just emotional. It was physical. We weren't affectionate the way we used to be. Her hugs had become one-armed. Her kisses were quick, distracted, like a task to complete. She didn't ask about my day anymore. I'd come home with stories, inside jokes from work, or dumb little things I thought she'd laugh at, and she'd nod without looking up from her phone. The connection was gone, and I hadn't wanted to admit it. Because once you admit something is wrong, you can't unsee it. You can't go back. I realized that every time she left the house, I felt something twist in my chest, not fear, exactly. Not jealousy either. But this sinking sensation that something was happening just out of reach. That she was slipping away while I stood there, too stunned to call out. I couldn't prove anything. Not yet. But I knew. I knew. And still, I said nothing. Because part of me wasn't ready to let go of the version of her I'd been holding on to. The one who made me pancakes on Sundays and danced barefoot in the kitchen to Stevie Nicks. The one who used to trace circles on my hand while we watched movies and whisper dumb ideas for baby names even though we weren't trying yet. I missed that woman. But I had no idea where she went. And I wasn't sure if she was coming back. So I started paying attention. Closely. Like a man learning a language he used to speak fluently, trying to relearn it from scraps. I checked the bathroom trash one morning. It felt pathetic, but I couldn't help it. I found a receipt tucked between tissues, a boutique downtown. High-end. I Googled it. A place that sold wine and skincare products so expensive they didn't list prices on the website. I looked through her recent photos on her phone when she left it charging in the kitchen. Nothing obvious, but I noticed something telling: fewer photos of us. None, actually. The last one together was from 6 months ago at a friend's wedding. Since then, it was food sh*ts, selfies, pictures of the dog, *ts of quotes. One, in particular, stayed with me. It read, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you're not happy anymore." It was saved to her favorites. That night, I stared at the ceiling again, just like before. Same position. Same sick feeling in my gut. Except now, the web wasn't invisible anymore. It was right in front of me. And I was tangled in it. The next morning, I told myself I was just going to surprise her. That's what I said aloud, at least. Like saying it made it true. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, fixing my collar, rehearsing a smile I hadn't worn in weeks. There was a small gift bag on the counter, a bottle of her favorite perfume, and a card I'd written the night before, congratulating her on the promotion she told me was unofficial but basically guaranteed. The lie I told myself was that I was doing something nice. The truth was I needed to know. I'd never visited her office unannounced before. We had a kind of unspoken boundary about our work lives, especially hers. She always said her firm was fast-paced, high-stress, not the kind of place where spouses just dropped by. I respected that. Trusted her. But trust is a rope. And mine was fraying. The drive downtown was oddly quiet. Traffic was light, music low. My hands gripped the steering wheel a little too tightly. I kept telling myself that I wasn't going to find anything. That she'd be at her desk, papers piled high, probably annoyed that I'd shown up looking lovesick and suspicious. But a voice in the back of my head, the one that had been getting louder these past few weeks, told me otherwise. I pulled into the underground parking garage of her building and took the elevator up to the 10th floor. Her office was sleek, modern, lined with glass panels and polite smiles. I felt out of place in a way I hadn't expected, like I was trespassing in a part of her life I was never meant to see. "Hi there," I said to the woman at the front desk, lifting the bag slightly. "I'm Nick, Taylor's husband. Just wanted to drop this off for her." The receptionist blinked at me. Taylor Vaughn," I clarified. "Oh," she said, tapping at her keyboard. "I think she's, She frowned. "Actually, she called out today. Took the morning off. Do you want to leave this with us?" I stared at her. "She's not here," I asked, already knowing the answer. "Nope." She said she had personal errands. "I can put this on her desk, if you'd like." I swallowed hard. "Sure." She smiled, oblivious, and turned back to her screen. I left the bag in her hands and walked back into the elevator, my heart pounding against my ribs like a drumbeat that wouldn't stop. Outside, I stood on the curb for a minute, completely still, trying to decide what to do next. My gut was screaming. I could have gone home, tried to rationalize it. But something in me had shifted. Something final. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. She had mentioned, weeks ago, a place her team liked to go for lunch. A trendy restaurant downtown, all exposed brick and overpriced salads. She talked about it like it was no big deal, just a spot they hit when the day got too hectic. I didn't think. I just drove. It was still early, just before noon, but the restaurant was already filling up. I parked across the street, trying to keep my hands from shaking. I wasn't even sure what I expected to find. Maybe her with coworkers, sipping coffee, laughing like she used to, but that wasn't what I saw. Through the wide front window, there she was, Taylor, sitting at a table near the back corner, facing the street. She wasn't alone. A man sat across from her. Mid-30s, maybe, with light brown hair and a pale blue dress shirt rolled up at the sleeves. I didn't recognize him, but what mattered wasn't who he was. It was what I saw. Their heads were close, closer than they needed to be. He leaned in when she spoke, like he was memorizing her. And she was smiling. Not politely, not nervously. Genuinely. Fully. And her hand was resting on his knee. That was it. That was the detail that broke me. The glass in front of me might as well have been a movie screen. I wasn't part of the scene. Just the guy in the car, watching the life he thought he knew fall apart in real time. My mouth went dry. My heart didn't race, it stopped. My fingers clenched the steering wheel, knuckles white. Couldn't breathe, couldn't look away. It was unmistakably int asterisk mate. Not we're friends. Not work lunch. This was something else. I don't remember how long I sat there. Could have been 5 minutes, could have been 30. Eventually, a waitress brought them wine. Midday. Taylor laughed at something he said and brushed her hair behind her ear. The same gesture she used to do on our dates, the one that always used to make me lean in for a kiss. I thought I'd cry. Or rage. Or get out of the car and demand an explanation right there on the sidewalk. But I didn't. I just sat there, frozen. Because in that moment, I realized something far worse than betrayal. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't scared of being seen. She wasn't worried. That meant she either thought I'd never find out, or worse, she didn't care if I did. I stayed until they asked for the check, until they stood and walked toward the exit. I ducked low in my seat, watching from the corner of my eye as they stepped out into the daylight. He placed his hand gently on the small of her back as they walked toward the corner. She didn't pull away. They didn't kiss. But they didn't need to. The truth didn't need confirmation. It had already been signed, sealed, and delivered. I waited until they disappeared down the street, swallowed up by the noise of downtown traffic. Then I sat in the silence, the sounds around me muffled, like I was underwater. I didn't go home right away. I drove around for hours, nowhere in particular. Just moving. My hands didn't feel like mine. My thoughts were scattered, blinking in and out like static on a TV screen. She had lied. But more than that, she had left emotionally long before today. And now I had seen it with my own eyes. There was no room for doubt. No what-ifs. No excuses. It wasn't the kind of thing you could talk your way out of. It was final, concrete, real. I didn't need her to tell me anymore, because the truth was already sitting beside me in the passenger seat, loud and undeniable. And I couldn't ignore it any longer. I didn't go inside right away when I got home. I pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, and just sat there, staring at the garage door like it was some kind of barrier I wasn't ready to cross. My hands were still gripping the steering wheel, even though the car had been off for at least 10 minutes. I couldn't move. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I finally knew. And I hated that I did. It was strange. I always imagined that if something like this ever happened, if the person I loved most ever betrayed me, I'd explode. Break something. Yell. Demand answers. But now that it was real, I didn't feel rage. I felt empty. Like something inside had caved in. Quietly. Efficiently. Without a trace. Eventually, I made my way inside, dropping my keys on the counter like I was moving through a script I didn't remember auditioning for. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I knew Taylor wouldn't be home for a few more hours, but that didn't make the silence feel any less suffocating. It echoed. I walked past her wedding photo hanging in the hallway. The frame was slightly crooked. I fixed it automatically, like I always did. Stupid reflex. Her smile in the photo looked so alive, so real. I remembered that day like it was yesterday. Her hands had trembled when she held mine. She laughed when I cried during the vows. She said she felt like she was walking into forever. Now, forever felt like a punchline. I sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the space where she slept, pillows fluffed, throw blanket folded the way she liked it. I noticed her water glass on the nightstand, lipstick stain on the rim. Red. Same as yesterday. I reached out and turned the glass slightly just to prove to myself that I still existed, that I could still affect the world around me. Then I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Hours passed. The light shifted across the walls from pale orange to a bruised purple as the sun dipped below the houses across the street. I didn't eat. I didn't move. I just sat there, cataloging every year of our life together like a slow-motion slideshow I didn't ask to watch. The early days. The road trips. The house hunting. The night we stayed up until 4 a.m. painting the kitchen the wrong shade of blue and laughing until we were breathless. The quiet mornings with her head on my chest. The way she'd say, "You always smell like coffee," and safety. I replayed them all. And then I realized something. I had been fighting for this marriage by myself. I had been holding it up like a man trying to keep a collapsing ceiling from falling, hands pressed upward in blind hope that she'd eventually notice, eventually help. But she hadn't. She'd walked out of the metaphorical room months ago. The last few months started making a different kind of sense now. She wasn't pulling away because she was tired. She was pulling away because she had already let go. She had emotionally checked out even while physically going through the motions. That's why the excuses came so easily. Why the stories never quite added up. Why I always felt like I was talking to someone through a wall of glass. She'd been gone long before I caught her at that restaurant. I stood up and walked into the kitchen, the tile cold under my feet. I opened the cabinet where we kept the wine and stared at the bottles she liked, imported reds, the expensive kind she only drank when she had reason to celebrate. There were 3 missing from the last case we'd bought. I hadn't had a single glass. She was celebrating something. I just wasn't part of it. I opened the fridge. Nothing jumped out as unusual, but it still felt wrong. Her leftovers were labeled, which she only did when she didn't want me touching them. A petty little thing that now felt loaded. I closed the fridge and leaned against the counter. The numbness was still there, heavy, dull. But underneath it, something else had beg asterisk N to stir. A kind of slow, deliberate anger, not wild or dramatic. Not the kind that made you want to yell or smash dishes. No, this was colder. Cleaner. I didn't want revenge. I wanted closure. I wanted control back. I left the kitchen and went to my office, a small room in the back of the house I rarely used anymore. It still smelled faintly like printer ink and the cologne I used to wear when we first moved in. I sat down at the desk and stared at my laptop. And I knew what I had to do. Years ago, I talked to a lawyer about a business dispute. Nothing serious, it had resolved quickly, but I remembered the guy. Sharp. No nonsense. Fair. I looked him up again. Same practice. Still in town. I clicked on his contact form, filled in my details, and paused at the message box. There was a moment of hesitation. Then I typed, requesting a consultation regarding potential divorce proceedings. Infidelity is involved. I have documentation. Would like to discuss next steps. I hovered over the send button. Then I clicked. Just like that, the decision was made. Not with shouting. Not with tears. Just a click. Quiet. Final. I leaned back in the chair, exhaling for what felt like the first time all day. There was no relief. Not yet. But there was something else. Stillness. A clarity that had been missing for weeks, maybe months. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how she'd react. I didn't know how messy it would get. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going to let myself drown in silence anymore. Later that evening, Taylor came home. I was still in the office, sitting with the door open. I heard the front door shut, keys hit the table, her heels click across the wood. She didn't call out. Just moved quietly like she always did when she didn't want to talk. She poured herself a glass of wine. I knew the sound of the bottle opening, the chime of the stemware. It felt scripted now. I waited a minute, then stepped into the hallway. She was standing by the window, glass in hand, staring out like she had the night before. Same exact posture. Same drink. Like nothing had changed. But everything had. I sent the first email, I said, voice flat. She turned, blinking. What? I contacted a lawyer. She didn't respond right away. Just looked at me. Then slowly she nodded. Okay. No panic. No questions. No denial. Just, okay. And in that moment, I realized she'd been prepared for this. Not in a malicious way, just in a resigned, emotionless way. Like she'd ended things for herself a long time ago and was simply waiting for me to catch up. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She didn't even ask what I'd seen. It wasn't indifference out of spite. It was absence. The kind that comes after someone has rehearsed the ending so many times they don't need a script anymore. I went back to the office, closed the door, and sat down in the silence again. But this time, the silence didn't hurt. It felt honest. I woke up the next morning before the sun. There wasn't any dramatic jolt out of sleep. No racing heartbeat or vivid dream. I just opened my eyes, stared at the ceiling, and realized I didn't feel fear anymore. Not fear of confrontation. Not fear of losing her. Because in every way that mattered, I already had. The room was still, painted in soft gray light. I sat up slowly, my body heavy with exhaustion, but my mind clearer than it had been in weeks. Maybe even months. The weight I'd been dragging, those invisible bricks of doubt, confusion, denial, they hadn't disappeared, but they weren't choking me anymore. I got dressed without turning on the lights. Jeans, a flannel shirt, no cologne. I didn't care how I looked. I wasn't going anywhere to impress anyone. Today was about paperwork. I made myself coffee in silence, avoiding the living room. Taylor was still asleep, probably curled into her usual side, wrapped in the blanket she used to pull over me when I fell asleep on the couch. I didn't feel like watching her pretend to care. By 8 a.m. I was standing in front of a tall brick building with a plaque that read Manning, Rowe and Fields, Family Law. I hadn't been here in years, not since that brief dispute over a freelance contract. Back then I walked in with confidence, armed with numbers and bullet points. Now I walked in with a knot in my chest and the kind of stillness that only comes after you've run out of ways to bargain with yourself. The receptionist looked up. "Hi, can I help you?" "I have a consult." "Nicholas Reynolds." She nodded, checked something on her screen, then smiled politely. "Mr. Rowe will be with you in a moment." I sat on a leather chair that squeaked slightly under me. The waiting room smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper. A young couple was sitting across from me, whispering intensely. The woman looked tearful. The man looked like he was about to bolt. I wondered which one of them had cheated, or maybe they both had. Then I realized how little it mattered. "Nick," a voice called. I looked up. It was Sam Rowe. A little grayer than I remembered, but still sharp, still composed. He shook my hand firmly and motioned me into his office. "Long time," he said. "Yeah," I replied, trying to find my voice. "Not exactly how I hoped we'd reconnect." He gave me a sympathetic smile and closed the door behind us. "Let's get into it." For the next 40 minutes, I told him everything. Not every detail, not yet, but enough. I told him about the distance, the lies, the restaurant. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I spoke in flat, even tones, like I was recounting someone else's story. He asked a few questions. Jotted notes. "You have confirmation of infidelity?" he asked. I nodded. "I saw them. It was an asterisk, mate. I also have some texts and location history." "She's not denying it." "Any children?" "No." He nodded again. "That simplifies things." There was something chilling about hearing your marriage described in legal bullet points. Like the last few years of your life were just sections in a filing cabinet waiting to be labeled and shelved. But it also helped. It made things real. "I want it clean," I said. "No drama. No dragging it out. I just want to move on." He leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers. "We'll start with a separation filing. If she doesn't contest, we can move straight to dissolution paperwork. From what you've told me, this shouldn't be a fight unless she wants to make it one." "She won't," I said without hesitation. "She's already gone." He didn't press further. Just nodded and slid a form across the desk. "This is the initial paperwork. It outlines terms and confirms intent to file. You'll also need to sign a privacy agreement so I can formally review any communications or records you've saved." I picked up the pen. My hand didn't even shake. I signed. It was official. Not finalized, but the process had big asterisk N. The wheels were turning. There was something both surreal and sobering about it. I half expected the world to shift around me when I set the pen down, but it didn't. The office didn't collapse. The ceiling didn't cave in. It was just quiet. We shook hands again. He said he'd be in touch within the week. I stepped outside, blinking into the daylight like I just walked out of a movie theater. I drove home with the windows down, letting the cold morning air hit my face. It didn't clear my head completely, but it kept me grounded. Reminded me that time was still moving forward even if everything else felt stuck. When I walked through the front door, Taylor was sitting by the window again. Same glass of wine. Same posture. Like nothing had happened. She turned when she heard me. "Where were you?" she asked, voice casual. I studied her for a moment. She hadn't even changed out of her robe. Her hair was tied up lazily, no makeup, eyes unreadable. "I had a meeting," I said flatly. "With who?" "My lawyer." She blinked. There was a pause. Not long. Just long enough. Then she sipped her wine and looked back out the window. Okay. No panic. No denial. No, please, let's talk. Just okay. And that told me everything. She was already gone. Emotionally, spiritually, maybe even morally. There was no fight left in her, not for me, not for us. And somehow that made it easier. I walked past her, upstairs to the bedroom, and sat down on the bed. I stared at the closet for a while, hers on the left, mine on the right. The symmetry was mocking. I opened a drawer and started folding her things. Not everything. Just the obvious stuff. Her sweatshirts she always borrowed from me. The earrings she left scattered on the dresser. The book she never finished on her nightstand. It wasn't an angry gesture. I wasn't throwing her out. I was preparing for what we both already knew was coming. That evening, we didn't speak. We passed each other like ghosts in a shared house. I ate dinner alone at the counter. She scrolled on her phone in the living room. The TV was on, but I don't think she was watching. I don't think she cared what was playing. I don't think she cared at all. And maybe that's the part that broke me more than anything else. Not the cheating. Not the lies. But the indifference. Because if she had cried, begged, lashed out, anything, I could have held onto the illusion that there was still something real between us. Something broken but alive. But she just watched it all happen. That night, I stood in the doorway to the bedroom and watched her for a while as she stared at her phone, completely unaware. Or maybe not unaware, just uninterested. I'm not angry anymore, I said quietly. She didn't respond. I just feel sorry, I continued. For both of us. She finally looked up. Her eyes were tired. Empty. Yeah, she said. Me too. And that was it. No apologies. No confessions. Just two people sitting in the ruins of something they used to believe in. I moved into a motel the next day. Nothing fancy, just a beige room with stiff sheets and a humming mini-fridge, but it was mine. Quiet. Honest. I hadn't slept in weeks, but that night I finally did. Not peacefully. Not all the way through. But I wasn't sharing space with someone who had already erased me. The messages started coming almost immediately. An old friend texted, "Man, I didn't know how to tell you. I heard about Taylor and that guy months ago." Then an email from someone at her firm. Not trying to get involved, it read, "But I figured you should know she and that guy had a thing. Lunches, drinks, rides home." It wasn't subtle. Each message felt like someone driving a nail deeper into the same bruise. People knew. They watched it happen and said nothing. Some even joked about it behind my back, I was told. I'd been the last to know. That was what hit the hardest, not just that she betrayed me, but that the world had moved on without me even realizing. Like I'd been standing still in a painting while the scene changed around me. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was humiliated. The next morning, I found my wedding ring in my duffel bag. I didn't even remember taking it off, but there it was, cold, heavy, irrelevant. I walked behind the motel to the river. It was quiet out there. Still. I stood for a while, the ring pressed into my palm. I thought about what it used to mean, promises, laughter, forever. Then I threw it. Watched it vanish into the water without a sound. I stood there until the chill crept through my jacket. And for the first time in weeks, there wasn't pain. Not really. Just silence. Not numbness. Not anger. Just peace. Whatever was ahead, it wouldn't have her in it. And for the first time, that felt like a blessing, not a loss.